Hey guys, how you guys doing? So you're about to listen to a story. It's a first-hand report um, from the eyewitness himself. However, his name will be not mentioned in the following, but you're going to hear his story, and later into the story, you'll hear some of our conversation towards the end. But I hope you listen to the very end, and I hope you enjoy what he has to share. Meanwhile, I would love to hear your feedback on what he experienced and everything he talks about. This was a great story. He shared this to me directly over the phone, and you're about to hear this gentleman himself. And this took place in Virginia in 2001. Thank you. Stay tuned.
Great. I'm delighted to be able to talk to you.
Yeah.
I tell you, I've been skirting around being afraid to embarrass my agency. So, and also wondering how that would affect me. I've just always been a little leery of things with that. But anyway, I'm just going to put all those feelings aside right now, and I won't keep you too long. I want to try to give you a background on me. I grew up here on the farm in Smith County on a dairy farm. My dad had dairy cows until I was about 13 or 14, and then he decided to sell them and go with. I mean, we had a grade A dairy. I had a nice 32 stanchion barn, and everything was going pretty well, but economically it seemed like it wasn't working out as well later on there. And so we went with beef cattle. So I had an agricultural background, and I lived out here in the country. I went to VPI 2 years at Withville to get basic start, and then I went to Tech and got my bachelor's in agronomy and in the soil science option. Now, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but my dad worked at Southern States part-time, and he found out through the county agent about a program they had where they would subsidize your tuition if you agreed to work as a soil scientist if it panned out for you and everything for the number of years that you were under their program. So I started out in Pulaski County back in 1977 and as a party member, and then worked there for about 3 years, and then helped out over in Giles County and finished that survey. Then I went to Smith County, back to Smith County, my home county, as we had an area office here, and I was kind of working as a assistant to the area soil scientist. And so I don't want to bore you with all that. What happened every 4 or 5 years, I started the Smith County Soil Survey as a project leader back in about 1983 or 84. And about every 5 to 6 years, well, basically 6 years, we were expected to finish the survey and move on to another county. So after I finished in Smith County in about 1991, I went to Grayson County and worked there until 1997. Then I went to Bland County, and I was a project leader, but only myself. I was a party of one, you might say. So I had all that country. We were doing an update. It was an old soil survey, so we were expected to go out and validate and update the work that had been done back in the early 50s or late 40s. And so I was doing what we called it transects, where you would try to go out in a straight line. You plot a straight line on the map and try to do it in a random manner so that you don't bias yourself on it, and just take soil descriptions and get notes. And there was an area in Bland County I wish I could give you the specific location. I could have years ago, but I can give you the general location of where this happened. And I mean, Daniel, I was in so many places over the years. In the national forest, we did contract mapping, and we went in places. I would go in places that I just can't believe I was there. Now I think about going in these places by myself. I found a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to probably find. I found marijuana pods and things like that, and I just walked away from them. Didn't even try to, I was worried about maybe someone watching me and what that might be. And I found areas where people had been fighting dogs, dead pit bulls and stuff, in heaps, and all kinds of things over the years I saw. But I never saw any. I wasn't thinking about Bigfoot or Sasquatch when this event happened. And I want to get to that because that's really the meat of the whole thing. So in Bland County, I was trying to get access to the base of an area around the base of Walker Mountain. There's the geologic contact. There was a limestone formation on sort of gently sloping land coming up towards the base where there was a lot of what we called colluvium. That would be material moving down from the upper slope down to the lower slope. But underneath that, there was a limestone contact, and there were caves. There are caves in those contact areas at the north-facing slope of Walker Mountain, where it joins the limestone residual soil, we call it. That's in soil or formed in place down in the valley. And there is the Walker Creek water source there, which waters that area and has tributaries around in that vicinity. So there's plenty of, it's just really, and the soils were very fertile because, so I had this area, and it had been a quarry. It had been abandoned. I don't know if it was because of economic reasons or if they'd run into a problem. I know sometimes they would break an aquifer and those things would fill up and you couldn't keep working in them. But the county didn't want me to go near where they had been working. They told me that they kept the area gated. It had a high fence, really hard, unable to climb the fence. I was supposed to get a key. They had it real secure as far as keeping people out because they were worried about what might happen if someone would get into some of those areas and get hurt.
Right.
And so I was supposed to contact, I kept calling a number so I could get the key to get in there. And this area is probably about a couple miles southwest of the town of Bland. And it spans up from a little state route. I believe it was Route 617 that kind of does a little horseshoe off of Route 42. Route 42 just goes all the way through Bland County and on into Smith County. And even if you take it east of Bland, it'll go on into Giles County, way on up in that area. And you're probably familiar with a lot of that country. Yeah,
I've actually driven through a lot of those areas with my job as far as making my deliveries for the company I work for. So, yeah, and plus traveling out of state too. I head down south sometimes every so often. So.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, I kept waiting to get this fella to return my phone call so I could get the key, and finally, it just wasn't happening. And I decided I can hike on in. So I did climb the gate. I had to leave my vehicle parked along the road. I must have hiked in about 1.5 miles. It was a beautiful morning, about early July. All I can remember, the thing that really overwhelmed me was how many deer I was seeing on the way in and all the blackberries. They had graded a road and then graveled the center of it, but left a considerable side of the road bare. It had been bare, and then it had grown up in a lot of blueberries all the way in, and they were ripe. I mean, you could have had buckets full, and I was amazed. And so I'm walking in on the road, approaching the area I was wanting to work in. And on my way in, it was such a pleasant day. It was probably about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, and the wind was a very gentle breeze kind of blowing in my face. Very pleasant weather, very few clouds in the sky. I was walking into a gentle breeze, so the deer really weren't scenting me. And I'm walking along, doing great. I come to an area where I'm kind of going to make a bend. And I know what I had been wanting to tell someone about it, but when it happened, I didn't know I couldn't even imagine what I'd seen and couldn't figure it out. And then I was wondering what I don't know. It just even now I get shook up trying to think about it. And so I go around this bend, and I describe it as a flurry of movement like I've never experienced in my life. And it was so huge. A reddish brown blur that when that happened, I didn't smell anything, but it could have been the way the wind was acting at that time. I made the bend, or else, who knows? Maybe you don't always have to smell anything. But at the time, I had no idea what it was. Massive, but it was moving so fast, it was like a blur. And so it went through all the blackberry area, and there was low brush and some piles of brush where they had graded the road, and it went through that and around that and behind that and up the bank so fast that I couldn't make out what it was. I thought, is that a bear? No, it's not the right color for bear, and it's way too big. And then as it got up to the bank where the brushiness, and on those north slopes, it can get really thick in vegetation. There was a lot of vegetation there that obscured the view of it. But for a split second, and I took a mental photograph, of that. My heart beats so fast when I talk about this. I saw a hind leg going up to its rear end that was huge, massive shape. It was covered with reddish brown hair, kind of shaggy, but it was in the shape of a man's leg. And that's about all I saw. And then it was just gone. And I was frozen. I was just frozen stiff, and I couldn't move. And I tried to figure out what it was I saw. And then what stood out, and I told it to both the people that I felt like I could really talk to before I had a chance to talk to you. That was Russ Jones. He had said, if someone has seen something, I saw a program he was on, if someone has seen something in near our area or something, contact me. I want to hear about it. Well, anyway, I did, and it was so good to talk to someone. The only person I had talked to before that was my wife. I told her that day I'd experienced something I couldn't understand, and it just blew me. It just shocked me. It just totally. I can't remember what I did the rest of the day. I think I went back to the truck and was just almost practically devastated, and I couldn't. I tried to figure out what it was I saw, and I couldn't. But what stands out is the fact that I had a experience on the farm with cattle, all my life. I had the ability. I thought, okay. I looked. I eased up, and then I was afraid to go any further close to where it was, but where it had been. But I tried to gauge on the vegetation how high it was that I saw the rear end of it, the hip of that leg. It evidently was crouched or forward or something, so I couldn't see the upper part of his body. But it was such a brief instant that I saw this, and then it moved in, but it seemed to hesitate just for a split second to give me that view, and I only saw that part of it, but that part of it is what haunts me today. And then this story also has a second a component of sounds that I didn't at the time. I didn't put them together, but after a few days I did. So I'll go on with that. So I looked at the vegetation at the area where it was going up to the top, where I could see its hip going in, and I thought, that's about the height of a cow's back, about 4.5, about 50 some inches, and so I thought, what in the world could that have been? And I was that's where I was, and I was just stuck there. And I was stuck there in my thoughts about it. I thought that could that have been a grizzly bear? No, that was shaped like a man's leg. That wasn't a grizzly bear. No way that was a cow. That wasn't a cow. That was just the leg I saw was a very muscular, very amazing, huge leg that was just for an instant visible to me. And so I've been stuck with that since 2001. But going, after that, I even from that point, I didn't know I didn't think about Bigfoot at first. But I want to get to the sound part. So I mentioned caves. One of the most frightening things about that week, and I don't remember if it was, I think it was a day or two after I had I call it a partial sighting. So in some ways, it might have been more scary to see if I had been able to see the whole animal well, or maybe it would have been less scary. I don't know, but I kept telling myself, it was wanting to get away from me, so don't be so afraid. I kept telling myself, at least it was running away from me. It wasn't running towards me. So I was able to still function, and get back out in the field because I had to. And I have been in some areas where people were not receptive to us, and I've walked up on people and they would have a gun and things like that. So I've had to learn how to sort of psych myself up to keep going. And I did, and I kind of put this in the back of my mind, and I couldn't figure it out, but I just put it in the back of my mind, and I guess it was a couple days after that, I was on another transect studying the same soil patterns at the base of Walker Mountain further east. It was a little closer to Bland, but it was in an area that was very, very remote and couldn't see any trails, only a game trail. I was walking along a game trail at that contact area, and I noticed a really large cave. The opening was really, really large. It was probably about 4 to 5 feet high, and really well-defined little cave there. And I was probably about 30 yards from the entrance, and I wasn't going to go in it, but I was just amazed what a nice looking cave that is. And then I heard a sound that sounded amplified, like it was speakers or something. It kind of vibrated my whole body. And it sounded like a cross between a hyena sound and a growl. And it had a cadence to it, almost like it had a something. It wasn't just a sound. It wasn't just a random noise. It had some kind of a something to it. Well, again, I think the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was frozen there for a minute, and then I started walking backwards, keeping my eye on the cave. And I made my way back to the vehicle and left. Wow. And so that was the only thing that, I've never heard a sound like that in my life. And I've never seen, we had been in some spots where I had smelled some really awful smells, and I would ask, I'd be working with someone, I'd say, what is that smell? Gosh, we'd be way out in the woods, and he just said, I just think that's a musty, organic decomposition smell that you run into now and then. But it didn't smell quite right for that. But I didn't even think about it being anything. And I know back in the mid-'80s, I had a fella, I was working in Smith County at the time, and I had a fella come work with me who was from Minnesota. And he said, after we'd been working for a while, one day we were going out in a real woolly spot there in the county, and he said, this area looks a lot like Bigfoot country. And I said, what do you mean, big Sasquatch? He said, a lot of people see them up there where I'm from. And I said, are you serious? You believe they're real? And oh yeah, I know people who've seen them. He said, I'm going to be looking out for them. Well, I had never even thought about that. So after I put it together, I became so interested in this subject. I thought, I saw a program, it seemed like around that time, that the Monster Quest, I guess it was, and they looked very interesting to me. And there was something that seemed to ring true when I saw one of those programs about, I heard someone describe what they'd seen, and I started thinking, that must have been what it was. And so from the early 2000s on, I've been really interested in this. And I went back to that area, but they have logged it, and it's just changed a whole lot, and just not the same. But I don't know what you think about that, Daniel. I just live with this, and it just seems like it haunts me. I think about this every day.
Yeah, well, based off of the details and the information you shared, I honestly feel comfortable saying that you experienced and saw a Bigfoot. And I'll tell you a little bit to back up and support your story. Just given the general location, I've actually know of people that have actually witnessed them down in those surrounding areas where you're located. Not to mention, I'm not allowed to give his name out, but I was actually shared some thermal image, and I'm not talking about cheap, low quality thermal. This is high quality, expensive thermal imagery of a couple people that were doing an investigation on a friend of mine's property. And they have, and I've seen this for myself, the thermal is so sharp, so clear. They had a Bigfoot working that property, and you see him walking right behind in the back of the tree line that goes up behind his barn. And so, yeah, I mean, between other reports from that area of sightings and hearing this here, I feel undoubtedly that you had seen a Bigfoot. So,
well, that's it's therapeutic, to talk to someone like you who understands this. And I had told a friend, and they just thought, what was I seeing things or what? I had one fella tell me he thought it must have been an elk, but there's no way it was an elk because it was so distinctly human looking. The leg I saw, I just, and the sounds was so horrifying. I don't know how to describe it, but it was so powerful. And I don't know. I have often wondered if a creature like that was in a cave, let's say, would I have, and I had been courageous enough to go in there, what would have happened? I mean, I don't know, but I certainly was almost paralyzed. I was sort of paralyzed and couldn't move. I didn't run. I've had other experiences where I was chased by a Doberman Pinscher, and believe me, I ran. But with this thing, for some reason, I was scared to the point that I couldn't even move. And it's hard for me to understand that.
Oh no, and you're not alone. That's kind of a common occurrence with a lot of people that have these type of encounters. I mean, your body doesn't know how to react. I mean, even your mind gets froze and like you're in a daze. You're like, what? You're trying to comprehend all at once. Your body and your system's freaking out, but at the same time, you're like, your mind's also trying to figure out what the heck to do.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate this, and I really did enjoy your conference. I think it was up there, I believe, near Stanton or in Augusta County. It was back when the pandemic thing was still kind of going on, and we were finally, my wife and I finally felt like we could go out and do some things that time of year, and I hope we can we were going to go to this last one you were going to have, but we weren't able to do it. She had a conflict. If we don't have a conflict, maybe we can go to the next one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The last one you came to, was that the one at the hotel?
I think it was kind of like a VFW.
Yes, that one there. Yeah, that was actually an old schoolhouse. It's actually a Roriton club. But for the our last one, and then the one where we are going to hold this, the one coming up this coming June, it's actually at the Wares Cave Community Center in Wares Cave, Virginia. It worked out so well this past June. We plan on continuing to do it because we have the vendors and speakers inside, and then we'll have overflow. We'll have vendors outside as well. So. We got that going on, and because it's not quite a mile off 81, and. So yeah, it's convenient. I mean, the only thing is, I wish there was hotels right off the exit for people, because we get a lot of people from out of state that come up, and. But yeah, there's hotels both north and south of there. You got the Stanton exits, Verona exits, and then if you go north, you got the Harrisburg exit. So.
Wow, that's great. I hope we can make it. I'm starting to notice my body. I came down with Lyme disease after being out in the woods so long. I don't know when I got it. I don't remember. Anyway, I'd had it for quite a long time, so it seemed to make some arthritis in my knees, and so I'm hoping when I get my knees fixed, I can get back. I had been walking up. I live at the base of Brushy Mountain here. It's the same range of Brushy Mountain where Hungry Mother Park is. I live a couple of miles east of Hungry Mother Park.
Oh, so you're around Marion.
Yes, and I live our land. We have about a mile where I haven't been able to walk back there for a long time. I have an ATV, but I don't like to take it in some of these places in case I would have a problem with it. But in my younger days, I could walk almost a mile back to the National Forest. I have always been looking, and I haven't seen anything. We have a lot of deer. I'm always interested and always looking, and never have seen anything back here. But for some reason, everything came together that day in Bland County. Someone, I think it was Russ Jones, said he thought it was the blackberries being ripe, because evidently it was into the blackberries.
Oh yeah,
that day.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to make mention. I compare Bigfoot in so many different ways to a black bear. As far as a lot of people mistaken black bear tracks for Bigfoot tracks. But their diets, I look at their diets. A black bear, they're mainly vegetarians, although they do eat meat. They're omnivores. There's 80%. Yeah, they're basically 80% vegetarian and 20% meat when it comes to bears. Bigfoot, on the other hand, I believe the percentages is probably a little bit more meat, but based off of their calorie intake and the proteins that they need to survive. So another thing I wanted to point out to you while I was thinking about it, because you mentioned after going through this area, you've seen all these deer, and then when you came around that bend, is when you experienced all this. Well,
Yes.
it made me think about two encounters I had in West Augusta, over in the George Washington National Forest. Of course, these happened a year apart, basically in the same section of woods, just around the corner from each other. Just prior to my encounters and my experiences, there were at least one deer present prior to having the experience. And when I share my stories, one of the things I always ask myself, and I even throw this out when I get interviewed about it, but was it a coincidence that there was deer there, or were they getting ready to make a hunt? So that's something, that question lays in my head, so.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was stalking. You may have had a Bigfoot that was stalking those deer, watching them, so. And there's always a possibility there could have been others around, because, it's believed that they work in groups, just like a non-human primate. They do the same thing when it comes to hunting. So. Yeah,
I sometimes wonder. I mean, I saw the mass, the reddish brown, huge mass run up, and then I kind of wondered, was that the same one with the leg I saw? It seemed like it just seemed to just. It's just the way my mind is just was so reacted to the experience, but I'll never forget seeing that image of that huge leg. And it just helps me to talk to you about it. And I'm just, I just think that it did help me to think, well, it didn't mean me any harm. I don't know what to think about some of the things I hear where, I know that with all animals, you have dogs, any kind of animal. We had a line of dairy cows that my dad called the snake line, and those, when you would wash their udders to get the start milking, they were just notorious for kicking, and even the offspring from them were very mean and hateful. Yeah. But they gave a lot of milk, and that's why my dad kept them. They had a real good production. And so I hear that some of these things about some of these accounts about Bigfoot, and I can understand throwing objects and things to maybe get people away, but even some of them are very horrifying about people being dismembered and killed, and I think that's possibly true, but thank goodness I haven't heard of much of that, and that's an interesting topic for me. What some people think about that. Are they, you have some people, for example, Marion. I used to tell people when I was at Tech, they'd ask me, where are you from? And they thought of Marion as the state hospital area where they had the criminally insane. So you have, in a population, you're going to have some individuals that are just, really dangerous and violent and aggressive. So there must be some like that, and hopefully we'll never encounter one like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of reminds me, because I've been asked numerous times, is Bigfoot dangerous? Will he attack me? I've actually been asked that recently. But I've always told everybody, almost any species, basically, as long as you don't put yourself or put them in that position to become dangerous, because most species will defend themselves,
Oh, yeah.
If you corner them, we'll put them in that, again, that position. But, even we know a venomous snake, copperheads, rattlesnakes, they only strike if they, to defend themselves.
Right.
I stay clear of them. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward. I believe in my lifetime eventually. I'm hoping I'll live long enough to finally. When Dr. Meldrum talks, he's got me. He knows what he's doing. He's got it down, And how could anyone dispute what he's found and his, the tracks that he studied and everything? And how could anyone not believe? I mean, in life, you find things that are superior in some aspect to some. I mean, there's the cheetah is one of the fastest land mammals. Well, evidently, Sasquatch is one of the most elusive and the most skilled at evading people. And it's got people who have actually worked in the wilderness areas like you and I realize how vast and how easy it would be for something to stay away. I mean, some of these areas, especially, I mean, even in places in New England, but here in Virginia, it's just wild out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I really appreciate talking with you, Daniel, and I won't keep you longer, but thanks a lot, and I hope to see you. I'll come up and greet you sometime. Hopefully I'll be able to see you at one of the meetings someday.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I definitely would like to keep in touch, and perhaps if you're ever up for it, maybe we could plan some a good weekend. I don't know if you're up for camping, but we could definitely go down. If you ever want to take me to this area, if we're allowed to get into these areas, I would love to check it out, investigate, and see what we might turn up.
Yes, I'm hoping I can walk better. I used to walk all day long up and down mountains and stuff, and I eventually have gotten this left knee has lost most of the cartilage in it, and it's real rough, and it starts seizing up with me after a few minutes, but I'm hoping I can regain it. But I've covered a lot of ground in my day, I guess, and got into mountain biking and was a little too hard on them. When I turned 50, I got into cycling really heavy, and they started really getting cranky there. But yeah, that spot, all the way from Rich Valley and Walker Mountain gains in elevation as you go east of this out behind Saltville. There it starts. There's a network of cavernous areas. We call it karst topography, where you have a lot of sinkholes, but then you go north of the sinkhole areas, there's a contact where there are caves.
Yeah.
And there's a cave in Rich Valley called Big Cave that's phenomenal. It's got some huge rooms in it. And so all up and down north-facing slope of Walker Mountain, when there's something that would be drawing a creature like that in, that is really a potential hot area.
Yeah, well, I'll make mention real quick. Saltville. I got a friend of mine that lives there that grew up there since he was a young kid, and he was actually this gentleman. He's an older gentleman, and he was featured on that show Mountain Men, one of the earlier episodes. And yeah, I had interviewed him, and he had a sighting when he was a young boy on his farm out there in Saltville growing up. So they're around that area.
Yeah. So. Well, great talking with you, Daniel. I sure appreciate having a chance to do this today. It was great, and Happy New Year to you, and hope to see you down the road later on.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions, please, don't hesitate to ask. Send me email, text, whatever you feel comfortable doing. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Not a problem at all. Thank you for sharing this with me. This has been awesome. So.
Yes, sir. Thank you.